Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching or listening to the podcast Tell Me Your Story. Today's guest is Daniel Jackson. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
It's my honor, my privilege to have you on, man. Let's just jump right into this. Let's
Why don't you
start from
say
the
that
very
now?
beginning. Let's
'Cause,
just jump right into this, man.
sure.
Let's start from the very beginning. Where does it all start for you? Where were you born?
I was born in New Jersey. I lived in a town called National Park, but I was born in another town called Woodbury. Um, and I lived there until I was 17 years old. And then my parents and I moved from there down to Delaware, Lower Delaware. They call it Lower Delaware because they call it Lower, Slower Delaware because everyone they take their time doing things down there. So, but yeah, and I lived there. I lived there from up until I was 35. I moved away for 5 years because I got married, came back. You see how that worked. Um, and then lived there. Met my now wife and lived there until I was 55. And now I live out here in Arizona, southern Arizona. I'm about 12 miles north of the Mexican border. I live maybe 20 minutes away from Tombstone.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So, for the younger generation, was there technology? Was there phones? What was going on in your childhood?
No. In my childhood, there was no technology. When I was a kid, we were the first kids in the neighborhood to actually have a video game, an Atari video game. So, you played Pong, ball just going bang, bang, bang.
Going back and forth, yeah.
Yeah, that was it. And then you had the race car thing too. You had a steering wheel and you just played race car, and it was just a little box that went across the screen. That was it. I mean, there was nothing to it. So, yeah, no phones. You had one phone in the house that was on the wall. That was a dial phone, and that was it. No, nothing else other than we had a stereo system in the house, and we had one TV in the house downstairs, and my mom and dad went upstairs in their bedroom. No real other technology or anything like that. By the time I was 14, I was playing drums. So I had a drum set in my room, but eventually moved it out to the garage because it was very loud in the house. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. This was when I was growing up. It was in the 1970s.
So that was during the rock stage. That's when rock was fully alive too.
Yeah, man. That's when all the good bands were out.
Yeah.
They weren't using auto tune or anything like that. No, you actually had to have talent and you had to be able to sing and play. So yeah, that in the 70s and then the 80s. So yeah, and I played in an 80s rock band when I was young. I had big hair. I wore zebra stripe spandex. I thought it was cool. I thought it looked cool. Maybe not so much by now, but yeah, that's when all the '80s bands were out. Dokken and Kiss and Night Ranger and all that stuff. Yeah, that's what stuff I was into. Motley Crue, all that stuff.
Did you get the chance to experience them live?
Yes, I went to a lot of concerts. I went to this is horrible to say, but I went to see Def Leppard back when the drummer had two arms. They opened up for Billy Squire. I saw Van Halen on the Diver Down tour. I saw I saw Quiet Riot open up for Black Sabbath on Quiet Riot's first tour. That's how old I am. I saw later. I saw David Bowie, and he had Peter Frampton playing guitar for him. That's how old I am. Um, I saw Sammy Hagar when he was still Sammy Hagar, and another band opened up for him called Crocus in the '80s. I saw Iron Maiden with Twisted Sister. I saw Twisted Sister with Dokken. Yeah, I saw a bunch of bands. It was that time, when you could go to a concert, and my buddies would get tickets, and tickets were like $7 or $8. So you couldn't beat it. But again, you think, oh, $7 or $8, wow, that's great. But back then, I mean, when I first went to get my first job at 16 years old, I was making $2.49 an hour. So I mean, times have changed, yeah,
And
yeah, they really have.
but yeah, people think like, wow, $2, that's it? That's all you was making? And
Yeah,
like nowadays you would say that'd be like what? That's like $20 compared to
yeah,
back then.
yeah, yeah, and especially with I mean, right now, what the price of gas is like over $5 right now. I mean, I don't who knows if it's going to stay there, but yeah,
Let's hope not. Let's hope it goes
yeah, because when
down.
I first started driving I didn't have a car. I bought a van. I had a van. I bought the van basically to haul my drums around. When I was getting gas, it was around 87 to 89 cents a gallon. So yeah,
I was thinking
yeah,
back like during that little when we were in COVID, that's when I seen it get to its lowest. I think the lowest I got it for was like probably about 130, 125.
oh yeah. We had gas over where I lived at that time in Delaware. It was like maybe like around $2. So, and I thought that was great, but
Yeah, I was like, keep it there, man. Let's keep the gas at that
yeah,
price.
it is not that way now. Yeah, I mean, we have a gas station over here because in southern Arizona, and I'm sure it's all around, a place called Circle K. And they have a thing where they just, once every like 6 weeks, they let, if you're a member, wow! You got a freight train over there?
Yeah, did you hear it? It's coming through town. Those
Holy
gas
crap!
prices.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Our Circle K, well, they put this out for members like every 6 weeks, and they have gas over there for 40 cents, 40 cents off a gallon. So, but that still doesn't make up for it being over $5 a gallon. So yeah.
Yeah. So being in a band though, did you get to open for anybody?
I did one. Well, I was always playing in bars. I played in bars from the time I was 17 until the time I was 33, 34 years old. Um, I never really opened up for any, I wouldn't call them big, but we did a festival one time. Again, this was in the 90s, and this festival was a local festival around town, and they had it once a year. And this festival, they had all these different bands that would come through. I saw Kansas there. I saw this guy Pat Travers there. Uh, I saw a bunch of different bands there. And then one year we got to play, and when we played on the big stage, and we played in front of Molly Hatchet. So, but we played to 5,000 people, so it was pretty cool.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
was that your biggest crowd, or did you have a bigger crowd than that?
Um, yeah, that was probably the biggest crowd. Everything else was just bars. We would play bars, but yeah, I mean, I was always in a good band. Always had a good band going. It was always a band that me and my friend Bill, the bass player, would start. Um, but we always had a good group of guys playing. And one of the last bands we played in is we called ourselves Stranger because we were stranger than everybody else. Uh, uh, we always packed the house every time we played at a bar, so never had a problem with that. They
Just
would
thinking
they
about.
would actually wait outside in line trying to get in because
And I'm
the
thinking,
place
I
was.
was thinking to myself, my buddy Aaron was talking about it the other day, how Metallica had like I think it was like 2.2 million people in Russia to
Yeah, it's a
perform it.
bit.
Like they were having a lot. I'm like, how could you fit that many people in somewhere? Like,
Yeah,
was they using
it's
somebody's farm?
big outdoor thing or something like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, and how much is how far is that PA system really going to reach out to everybody else? You're probably not hearing it. You're just there for the atmosphere.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, 2 million people at a
Yeah,
concert. My
yeah,
goodness, that's half that. And that was in Russia too, so that was like
Yeah. Well, I lived in Delaware, and by the time I left, there was only 996,000 people who lived in the entire state. So that's a lot of people.
what happens out in Delaware? Anything good? You got anything good out there?
Nothing really. It's got a beach. It's got a beach called Rehoboth Beach. There's another place called Lewis, although it's spelled Lewes. People call it, oh, I'm going to Lewis Beach. No, it's Lewis. So, yeah, the beach there, Rehoboth Beach. It's a nice beach. Um, Very family oriented. Um, but it just when I first moved there, I was again 17, and you could go down to the beach and you could actually get a parking space. Um, you would pay for the machine and you'd put a quarter in and you would get 20 minutes for a quarter. Now, if you put a quarter in, you get 5 minutes. So
Depending on where you go.
yeah, yeah, and they don't even have quarter machines anymore. Now you put your debit card in, and it was just. And then by the time we left, it was a very crowded beach. There was another beach that went down. You went a little further down. You went into Maryland, and it was a place called Ocean City. And once a year, or in September, they had a bike week. And I ride motorcycles now. I gave up the music for motorcycles, um, and so I've been to the bike week probably around 18 times over there. But
Yeah.
it's just it's fun just to be around all the motorcycles and the loud roaring sound. It was loud there the whole entire time. Um, but it's just one of those. A bike show is for all these gazillions of vendors just trying to sell you all their garbage bike stuff that you really don't need, and sunglasses and all this other crap. So, but it's just the atmosphere that really people go down for, and that's what I did. So, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah. And the nice part about Bike Week is because we actually get here in Ohio, in Sandusky, they come through it like I think in June, and they always have like some big performance. But like you
Yeah.
said, it's an experience. You get to see
Oh yeah.
like all the '80s bands pretty much. I think the
Yes.
last year we had Poison. Poison came through.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've seen Poison before. I saw them on a tour as well. In I think it was 2001 or maybe 2000, something like that. And I saw them with it was Poison, Cinderella, Slaughter, and Dokken. So that was a big one. But yeah, they did the same thing down in Ocean City. The last bands I saw there was Kix and George Lynch's version of Lynch Mob at that time. So, but it was pretty cool.
Do you
Yeah.
guys also get Jackal out there too?
No, we have never had Jacko out there. I mean, they may have now since I've been gone for 4 years, but yeah, I've never gotten to see Jacko. I was never a
Does it
big
seem?
Jacko fan. I mean, they had two songs, but other than that,
Yeah, the Lumberjack song.
yeah,
They,
Lumberjack.
they
I
love
love
to play that
Lumberjack.
song.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's kind of comical to me. I don't know. They were just kind of comical to me, you know.
Yeah, they come here every year. I mean, I thought for the longest time they were sponsoring it because you just see them every year.
Really?
Jackal,
Yeah.
yep, Jackal is performing sometime
Yeah, well, when you're
somewhere.
trying to make a living, man, you got to do something, you know. I mean, those guys are what
Yeah,
now? 80, something like that.
yeah, they're up there, man.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how they do it. You know, I'm a 59. I don't want to get up around and do what they do. That's for sure. But
No, no. The first show I actually seen was Eddie Money.
wow, wow. I
Yeah,
never got
Eddie
to see
Money.
him. I liked him.
He came
Yeah,
around doing the 2 Tickets to Paradise, and it
yeah.
was cool because it was like towards the end of his career, like before he passed away, where
Oh, yeah.
he had his family in it now. He had his
Oh,
daughter performing with him, his son performing with him.
wow.
Trying, I think he was trying to kick off their careers, trying to get them going
Yeah,
in a new direction, and not
yeah.
living in his shadow.
Maybe it was just cheaper that way.
Like here you go, let's get him going.
Yeah.
So back to your story though. We
Sure.
get to talking about Bike Week. So you're 17, you're in high school. What is the experience like there?
Um, in Delaware it was different. It was a complete culture shock for me. When and I'll have to say it in the best way possible. I'm not a racist person whatsoever. I look at people as they're just people. Okay. It depends on how people treat you and how they act. That's all. Um, I went to school when I lived in my town in New Jersey. It was called National Park. There was one family and one black kid in town. That's it. And we all knew him. And we were friends with him. A great guy. His name was Danny Knight. And then there was when I went to high school, one black kid. When I moved down to Delaware, half the school was. And I was like, but it was just different. But it wasn't a big deal. I met some friends really early on. I had big, long, poofy hair again, because I played drums. It was just a different experience because I really didn't know a lot of people. I got there. I was the new kid. I was the new kid when I got there. I was in 12th grade, so I really didn't know a lot of people, or so I thought. And not until later on in life, I actually went to a high school reunion for down there. As soon as I walked in the room, I'm like, "Hey, Dan!" I'm like, "Who the heck are these people?" I mean, I didn't know I was that popular, but yeah, it was just a big culture shock for me. It was just a 17 years old, come to a new state, don't really know anybody, have to learn the lay of the land, have to figure out where I am because I knew everywhere to go in New Jersey, even though I had only just started driving by the time I was almost 17 there. But yeah, it was just a huge culture shock. Again, playing drums back there. There was a big scene. I looked older than I was, so I had a friend who I'd go back and visit all the time, and him and I would go to a club over there. And you were supposed to be 21. I was like 18 years old, and I was able to get into this bar, and I'd go up there every so often. And when I was going up there, um, I would see my drum teacher there, and he played in a famous rock band, but wasn't famous at the time, called Cinderella.
Wow.
So he played with them, and I would go up and see him and talk to him all the time. And then I was also there, but I was also going back to visit there quite often. And I'd take my buddy from Delaware, the bass player Bill, and we walked into that bar one time, and we were standing there. And this was a couple of years later, and we were standing there, and Tom Kiefer walks in. And everybody's like, "Oh my God!" I turned to my buddy, I said, "Hey man, look at this!" And he's like, "Holy crap! I mean, I can't believe that's Tom Kiefer." And I was like, "Yeah, that was nice to see him when he played on the stage." And they used to they had no money, and for costumes they had these wristbands on, and they were like white with stripes in the middle of them, and what they actually were that they were tube socks. You'd cut the top off and they put them on there and use them as part of their costume. But yeah, and then I saw them there. And that night we were there to see. We saw another band that was called Heaven's Edge. They came out with one album later on, and that was their debut there. And as their debut there, we were sitting at the bar, and the guy who was sitting next to us was this guy named Billy Childs, who plays for another band called Brittany Fox.
Wow.
The night before that, we had gotten invited to go over to a place called Hammerjacks, but we didn't know how to get there because we saw a band the night before at this little tiny club in Dover, Delaware. There was 12 people in the place, and there was this band, there was up and coming band that was just coming out, and they were called Warrant. It was Warrant.
Really?
Yeah, they played this club. There was 12 people in the bar. They actually did a photo shoot there, I guess, later in the evening for Shure microphones, and they did it at this bar. And there was nobody there, so we hung out with those guys. What you would call backstage, this little back room, and just talking to those guys and met those guys. They were really nice, and they're like, "You should come and see us. We're going to be tomorrow night at this place called Hammerjacks," but we couldn't figure out where the heck it was because again, no telephones back then. You didn't have any GPS or anything like that. So instead, we couldn't find that. So we went over to this bar called the Galaxy over in New Jersey, and we saw Tom Kiefer and this band Heaven's Edge, and then Billy Childs sitting next to us. He's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" It was just a strange evening, but but yeah, that whole time period for me was just, it was hard to get used to because I had so many friends back in New Jersey. And then when I moved to Delaware, I didn't really know anybody, but I just hooked up with all the guys who were musicians. And my buddy Bill was basically the only musician that I met that was any good. Everyone else was kind of just, I don't know. I was used to a standard of musicality, and I just, when I got to Delaware, it was just horrible. But it was like
Yeah,
it was a bunch of farm boys. That's all it was.
yeah, at least you're being honest though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, but I eventually met other people, and I played in some really good bands. But I really had to search for that. So
Warrant only had 12 people at that
yes,
performance.
they had 12. They had a bus that showed up. We were talking. My one friend Brian was hanging out with a guitar player named Joey Allen. Um, that's not his real name. His last name is Cheggles. He said he was telling my buddy. He says my name is Cheggles. You know, like Bagels, but he says it's Cheggles. But I have to change my name because it doesn't Cheggles doesn't look cool on an album. So
No.
yeah, but yeah. So yeah, we hung out with them. But yeah, there was only 12 people in the place. I mean,
So
I
that should
saw.
tell, like, I'm thinking to myself as you're saying that, that should tell somebody like right now who's watching or listening that it all starts from like you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, well, there were people there who were playing. What's up? There was a these bands. This one bar would have big bands that came through. They came through. There's that one. I forget the name of the band. It was an all-girl band, heavy metal band. Uh, the drummer's name was Roxy something, but I was living on the edge of a broken heart. They were there. I mean, again, there was maybe 50 people in the place because the place wasn't a big place. Um, the girl that sang "Voices Carry"? She played there. Um, the guys that were in that one movie with Eddie Murphy, the Bus Boys, they played there. It was kind of strange. And then there was another bar in town, right up the road, that also had big acts in there. I saw Mr. Big in there. I saw Blue Oyster Cult. I saw Foghat. I saw this guy Pat Travers, Boom Boom Echoes the Lights, like 4 or 5 times over there. I saw a different incarnation of Rat play there. It was Rat without Stephen Pearcy. I saw Skid Row there without Sebastian Bach, and they had their second singer. So they had a ton of bands that played there as well. And because I was in a local rock band there and I played at that bar, they would let me stay backstage. And when everyone would leave, and me and my buddies would hang out with all these rock stars. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
So this place though, it just like it didn't like people didn't know about it or what was going on there.
This is when a lot of these other bands were like on their way down. They were not.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
they were not doing very well at that point. I mean, when I saw Blue Oyster Cult there. Geez, it was in the late '90s. So they were really longer popular anymore. As well as Skid Row, they had a different singer now. This guy named Johnny Solinger, and he was really good, but they weren't, that popular anymore. Mr. Big was on their way out. They're all again Rat without Stephen Pearcy. They had another guy named Jizzy Pearl who was singing, and then they had another guy who was up on stage playing guitar with Warren DeMartini, and this guy was famous at one time too. He played with a band called Motley Crue. He played. It was John Corabi, the guy who sang with Motley Crue for like one album. So he was up on stage. He was just making a living. That's all he was doing was playing guitar in Rat, in this version of Rat, making a living. So, but yeah, it was Warren DeMartini and the drummer Bobby Blotzer, and then a couple other guys. That's all. But yeah, this is when they were all heading like they're doing now. All these bands are out on the road. They're not the same members. I mean, geez, Foreigner's out on the road right now, and there's not a single original member of the band right now. So they're ripping people off, which is kind of I don't, Leonard Skinner plays. There's not a single original member of Leonard Skinner. It hasn't been for 2 years. So So yeah, but these places would just get these bands. I saw Quiet Riot there twice, but the original, I mean, besides Range Road, so the original Quiet Riot, I saw them twice there, and then another place down in the beach in Lewis Beach. But yeah, this is when on the back end of their career. They were just trying to make a collect a paycheck, but they were good.
There.
But yeah, that was my life. Yeah, just going just I again played music. That's all I did. I lived, breathed, eat, music the entire time.
Music
That's
man, the
all I did.
music
Yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah. And then after the music was over, I couldn't function anymore. I was a diabetic. I had some diabetic issues that caused me I can't play anymore. Right now, I mean, I'm losing muscle mass in my hands, so I can't even hold drumsticks anymore. So after music was over, then that's when I had always wanted a motorcycle, and I got a motorcycle. Now I have two motorcycles, and but I mean throughout the years I've had like 10 of them. So and my life is basically I love doing motorcycles, but that's not what my life is all about now. So
Well, let's get into that. Now that
yeah.
the music career is like fizzled out and you couldn't do it no more. What was the next phase of your life?
The next phase of my life was I sold my drum set. I had two drum sets. I had met someone who I'd gotten married to. I sold my drum sets. I had two drum sets, 8 snare drums, 22 cymbals. I had all this extra equipment, sold it all, bought my first motorcycle. Um, my brother taught me how to ride. I bought a motorcycle, went out on my maiden voyage. I left the driveway. I the houses were real close together, and there was grass there, and I hit the grass, and the people had just watered their lawn. As soon as I
Oh
hit the grass,
no.
the bike slid right out from under me, and I slammed right into their house. So now I have a big scar on my leg that looks like the Nike symbol. I just did it all right, that's for sure.
You just did
Uh,
it, man.
yeah, yeah. But but I continued. I'd gotten my license, so I was just waiting around for my leg to heal up, and then when it healed up, and then I went and did that. And then I was just immersed in that. I wanted to ride my bike all the time. I rode that bike for about a year. Um, my wife at the time was riding with me one day, and we were going down the road, and the wind came across the road and blew us across the road because it wasn't a very big bike, little Suzuki 800, and we stopped, and she's like, "Can we just go home?" I was like, "Yeah," and we got home. She's like, "I want to go riding with you, but I can't ride on that bike. It's too small." She said, "You need to get a bigger bike." And I said, "I love you." So we went to I looked around. I bought another motorcycle. I traded that one in, bought another motorcycle, big Honda VTX 1300. I had that one for 5 years. I drove 58,000 miles on it in 5 years. I went everywhere with that motorcycle, and it was more. I started meeting more motorcycle people, and then there was a motorcycle shop that was maybe a couple miles from the house, and I was hanging out there every Saturday and hanging out there, and ended up going to that shop for a total of 17 years before it actually closed. And but when it closed, it was a couple. It was the that was a year before I had actually packed up and moved to Arizona. But I had been everywhere on motorcycles. I had taken that motorcycle. I had been from Delaware. My buddy and I rode from there all the way over to Tennessee in 12 hours. We did a road over there called the Tail of the Dragon. It's 11 miles long with 318 turns in it. Um, you can't go over 35 miles an hour because if you do, you're going off the side of the road. There's no guardrails, and you're on a mountain. And there's so many. You get to the end, and there's a place where you buy T-shirts and a little hotel. And there's a tree there with no leaves on it, and it's all these motorcycle parts hanging off of it. They call it the tree of shame from people, all the people with accidents and stuff like that. But beautiful country over there. But yeah, and that was my life again. It was just I was all immersed in motorcycles. It was all about that. And, I eventually moved away from Maryland because the marriage wasn't going so great, and I joined a riding club and got immersed in that. Met a bunch of people there. I always had this one friend though that I had met in from being in Maryland. This guy named Paul. He's still my friend. I haven't seen him in person in 4 years because I live in Arizona now. But we talk regularly, and him and I rode everywhere together. We just rode everywhere together. Him and I were always, hey, what do you want to do this week? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to, always riding somewhere. Um, I was when I moved away from Maryland, I worked at a job, and then I had a really bad work accident there, and I went to work on my motorcycle, and I left in an ambulance that day. I had was working at a place in a freezer place, and I was working at this machine doing someone else's job because I had to leave early that day. And a guy came up behind me and picked up 2 pallets of frozen chicken, and then they started to fall apart. And he dropped them, and when they did, they collapsed and fell on top of me. Um, so I ended up having, from that, I had 2 back surgeries and a hernia surgery. And my last back surgery, I have 4 screws in my lower back and titanium screws, and I had to go to physical therapy for 4 years, basically kind of relearning how to walk properly again because I was so messed up. I walked with a cane for 2 years, um, and that was an ordeal. I was out of work for 4 years. Um, I was had to go to court for that twice. We won, but you don't get much. You don't get much from being on disability and all that stuff. And But luckily, I mean, my friend Paul, I was telling him, I was like, I don't know if I can keep the bike, and he said, don't sell the bike, man. If you sell the bike, you'll never get another one again. And he was right. And so I kept the bike, and then so yeah, he was my best friend and still is. And um, we went to those bike weeks all the time. We went to a parade up in DC a bunch of times called Rolling Thunder. It was for in memorial for POWs and MIAs, and and just it was just doing that all the time. I was always riding motorcycles, and um, I eventually sold that bike, got a sport bike, did that for 6 months, and then I developed something called frozen shoulder because of my diabetes. So I couldn't raise my arm up any higher than that. It wouldn't go up all the way up like it does now, barely. And and so I had to have that manipulated during one of my back surgeries. But it was always, even after the back surgery, my first words that come out of the doctor's mouth were, "When can I get back on my motorcycle?" I mean, that's all I cared about. That's all I wanted to do, and I still enjoy it today. So I got rid of that sport bike, bought a Kawasaki, a big 1600, and then I got rid of that, and then I got a Harley, a little Sportster. That was a cool bike, and then I moved on from that to a Super Glide, and then I moved on to the Super Glide. When I met my wife now, and I sold it and bought something called a Fat Boy. I still have it. I was riding it yesterday. Um, and then I got another bike called a Lowrider and had that for about a year, and sold that. Got something called a Can-Am. It has 2 wheels in front, one in the back. I had that for about a year and a half. Sold it because it wasn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. And then I got something else called a Street Glide, and I have that as well. I still have that as well. But that's not, again, I still enjoy doing the motorcycles. There was even one point when I was in with that one of those bikes. I was in a not so nice motorcycle club. Not that I was. It was all. It was an MC club. I was in there for 4 years. I was always riding with people beyond my friend Paul. All these other people I riding with all the time. All they wanted to do was go out to bars and drink all the time. And then I was always helping them pick their bikes up because they couldn't freaking ride, and I wasn't a drinker. So I got up with these guys who were called the Phoenix MC, and they were all about sobriety. And it was but it was still a bunch of politics and stuff. So I just didn't fit in with them. I knew I didn't, and there got to a point where I said, okay, I got to get out of here because there was something else that was taking place in my life that I just knew I could not be in this environment because I'd always come home angry from the meetings and all that stuff. And and my life had taken a really huge change. There was something that was taking place throughout my entire life that I didn't make it very public to people. Um, I did sometimes to close friends, but and then around this period, that's when my whole life took a complete and total 360 change as to what I'm doing now. So yeah.
I want to ask though. So when you had the back injury and you rode, you had like countless bikes, man. You listed off a bunch of bikes. But I wanted to ask. So when you had the surgery, was it harder for you to ride a bike because of all the nerves in that back, like with
Um,
the vibration and everything?
no,
Did
it
it
was, it was
trigger at all?
actually it was easier to ride my motorcycle than it was to drive my truck. My truck, because the way a chair is in a truck with that lumbar kind of that put a lot more pressure on my back and made it very difficult for me to drive my own truck. But ride the motorcycle, I always had a nice bike and always had good suspension. So no, I had no problem. It actually made me feel better because the vibration would actually loosen up the tension in the muscles in my back. So I mean, even as I got off when I get off the bike, I always had a low sitting bike, so I didn't have to lift my leg up real high. Like even now, I don't. I have what's called a bagger. It's got two bags on the back and hard bags, and a big fairing on the front. But some of them have those big tour packs and stuff like that. I can't have one of those because I can't lift my leg up high enough to get it over the seat. So and then when I get on my bikes now, I have to position myself a certain way because my leg will only go a certain way, and that's it. And then I swing it over. But no, the motorcycle riding actually makes my back feel better.
And now even with the frozen, you said it was what called the frozen shoulder.
That was difficult. Yeah, because
Okay.
when I got that sport bike, it wasn't completely bent over. It was called a standard, where the bars were up a little higher. But that after when that first came on the frozen shoulder, because I got it in my left arm and then I got it in my right arm. Um, but I cured it in my right arm myself. That the left arm they had to manipulate it during surgery and when I was out because it was because what they're doing is breaking up all the calcium and all that stuff. So and all the scar tissue inside. But yeah, that was difficult. That was very painful. I if I lift my arm just a little because I had a when I had my hernia surgery, I told them prior, hey, please don't move my left arm in a crazy position. I have a frozen shoulder. Oh, no problem. Don't worry about it, Mr. Jackson. And then I woke up and I was like, ah, screaming, who the hell moved my arm? Yeah, that was kind of crazy. But yeah, there was it was much more easier to ride my motorcycle. And then the place that I worked at, I went back to work after about a month when I first injured myself. But I was walking around with a cane. I couldn't do my regular job, so they had me doing these really menial jobs, cleaning the kitchen and all this other stuff. I just had to be there, is what they want. And then after a month, then they fired me. Um, because you're allowed to in Delaware. And then, unbeknownst to me, when I was out riding my motorcycle, I was actually being followed by a private investigator who was taking videotape of me. But the only problem was everything that I was doing was not against the law. Although, even though they kept telling me, "Oh, you're breaking the law. We're going to send the cops to your house," and all this, they were just trying to intimidate me and stuff like that. And I even went to a doctor, and he said, "Hey, I got to tell you something. Here, let me show you something." And I was like, what? And he's like, he said, I came in this room with this other guy. And he said, I got to tell you. He said, they're actually following you. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah, they're following you, taking video of you and all that stuff. And then I found out later they were. And then they tried to take me to court for unemployment insurance. But the judge of the unemployment said, she said that he's not doing anything that's against the law. So what are you taking video of? And why are you breaking this man's privacy and all this stuff? And she was mad at these people. He's like, but I got all his evidence. She's like, I don't want to hear your evidence. She said, no, give him his freaking his unemployment. So yeah,
Hmm.
and that always worked out that way. I mean, during the first surgery when I went in, I'm waiting in the waiting room, and then she said, Mr. Jackson, there's a phone call for you. I'm like, from who? She's like, I don't know, somebody from cold storage. I was like, "Oh, what do they want?" I pick up the phone and they said, oh, we're not paying for your operation. You're just, I don't know what you're going to do, but you're just, it was always intimidating me trying to, and then the doctor called down and I told them and they said, oh, don't worry about that. You just get it. We're just doing it anyway. And we're charging the insurance company. They're just telling you that because they're trying to get one over on you, but they never do. But they're always trying to be very intimidating towards me. It was horrible. Absolutely. Bill collectors called me all the time, and my lawyer just kept telling me all the time. He said, "Hey, just let it go. Don't worry about it. We'll get it all taken care of in the end." And they did. But yeah, it was horrible. It was a horrible experience for about 4 years.
As you were talking about that, I'm thinking about a similar situation that just happened at my job recently, where a guy happened to be walking out of the building. He had just gotten off work, walking out the building, and one of the ceiling panels came down and swiped him right on the head.
Yeah.
Busted him like he looked like a wrestling match where he had the crimson
Yeah,
skull, he
all
had
sliced open and blood.
blood just
Yeah.
gushing down his head. And instead of the company actually doing something about it, it kind of just like tried to sweep it underneath the carpet.
Yeah, that's what they did with me. I mean, they had a perfect record. They didn't have an accident for almost, I think, like 3 years. And then they had this, and then they wanted to blame that on me. And I said, how are you going to blame that on me? This guy was on the pallet. We had just gotten done with an actual meeting about safety. And this is how poorly they would do things over there. They would take, instead of wrapping plastic around a pallet to keep things from moving, they didn't do that. They had this real thin little tape that had like thread in it. They took one layer of it, put it around the top boxes, and then that was it. And then they thought that was safety. So, and then when we got done the meeting, we went out there, and I was back at that machine, and the guy picked up the two pallets that I was putting together, and then he picked them up, and they started to jiggle, and that's what they said in the video. And he put them down. When they put them down, they just collapsed and fell on top of me. And then when they said it looked like I was laying on a box of like a bed of chicken boxes because I was out. And they when they woke me up, I was laying on a backboard, and they was getting ready to take me to the hospital. And but again, they wanted to blame it on. They had me do a pee test and all this stuff. I'm like, I don't do anything. I mean, you know that we have to do these annual pee tests and all that stuff. And but the guy with the forklift, did they pee test him? No.
Yeah, that's what it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to me,
Yeah,
especially with that situation.
They wanted to blame
Where
it all on me. Yeah. It didn't
Yeah,
work out for them. Didn't work out.
and then on top of that, do you think they would give you some give you a week off, let you recover from that, give you a couple of
Yeah.
days to get yourself together? No,
Yeah.
he had to use his own vacation time.
Yes, me too.
Then like you said, when he came back too fast. He came back like 2 days afterwards, and they did exactly the same thing. They drug tested him, and I know that's for what most companies do to
Yeah.
cover their own tracks.
Sure. Sure. When I went back, again, I had to be doing all these menial jobs because it's a freezer cold place. You know, it's a freezer storage facility. So there was ice around all the place, and they didn't want me walking around out there, and I get it. And so they would send me in the deep dark freezer box, and they'd have me go back there and clean stuff. And you wore a cold suit because when you walked in the freezers, it was 30 below zero. So, but out on the dock during the regular daytime, it was 30 degrees. So so you got used to it. It changed me a little bit because you go out in the summer, you know, and it felt different. But that went away after a while. But yeah, they were always trying to, you know, they would send people into the break room while I was sitting there cleaning the place up and stuff like that, and they would literally send people in there to harass me. Oh, you're faking. You don't know what you're doing. You're faking. You're a faker. Oh, really? Is that why I'm going to their doctor? And the doctor says I need a surgery? Really? You believe I'm faking? Is that what it is? Okay. And I never responded to it. And then there was that one day they brought me down into the office, the main guy's office. And they said, well, we have something to show you. And I was like, oh, okay. So next thing you know, I'm being surrounded by all these guys. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then they bring me in the office, and then they show me the video of the guy taking video of me. going into the bank and getting off my bike and walking in with a cane and coming out. And you can see me. I'm like, and
You're like
so
in pain, and yeah, they're
yeah. And
trying
then
to.
he says, "How can you ride that motorcycle?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "How can you pick that up?" I said, "It's like a bicycle. It's on a kickstand." "What do you mean, pick it up?" He said, "Well, it's got to be heavy." I said, "Not when it's on a kickstand. You're just doing this. That's it. That's not affecting your back." "No, it's not. I said, "It's more comfortable to ride that than it is to drive my truck." So I don't know what you're talking about. What are you trying to get at? "Oh, you're breaking the law by doing that. You're not allowed to do that. That's against the law the whole entire time." And I was like, "No, it's not. I have a motorcycle license. I'm not breaking any laws." And I said, I have a note from my doctor that says I'm okay to ride my motorcycle. So what's the problem?" And two of the guys that were in the office, they wouldn't even look at me. They were just, they knew what was going on. So, yeah. And then one guy walked me out and he said, "All right, let's go get your things. You're fired." I'm like, "Okay, no problem." He's like, "You don't have anything to say?" I said, "No, I don't know." I said, because my lawyer prior to that said, "Don't." He said this was going to happen. He said, "Don't say anything." I said, "Okay." He said, "So you're not angry? You're not angry at me? You don't want to take a swing at me?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "No, I'll leave." Because he said, if we have to fight." I said, "What are you talking about? Why would I fight you? You're firing me. You're letting me go for something I know I didn't do." So I kept telling him, I said, "This is your fault. This isn't my fault." I said, "You know this is your fault." So, and then I walked in, got my stuff, walked out. "Have a great day. See you." Yeah, yeah. But yeah,
So,
it was a crazy part of my life.
so what came out of this case? What was the final saying of it?
Um, $60,000 after 4 years. The lawyer got $20,000. I got $40,000. Um, when I went on disability, I was getting checks for $800 every 2 weeks. And then that would dwindle down because they said cost of living and the way things are in the government and all that stuff. Um, my very last check, the last four checks that I got within 2 months, each one of them was $12. I was at that point, but I'm always good about saving my money. So I had enough money in the bank that I could live off of. But there's $12. I mean, it was just, and I was on unemployment. They were expecting me to go to all these classes, and I said, "How can I do that when I'm only getting $12 a week?
Yeah.
For, I gotta go over to Dollar Tree and eat over there." I was living with my sister, and because we were taking care of my mom at that point, because my mom had a couple strokes. Um, what am I supposed to do? So, and then eventually, through unemployment, they got me into a program to go to school. And I went to school for something called electronic health records, doing just the computer part of medical. And I did that for 6 months, and then I got my certificate from that. And then after that, I got a job, and I worked in the best place possible, prison, for 6 years. I ended up working in prison for 6 years, doing medical records in prison, and that was another crazy ordeal. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
a
then,
big switch up going from music to working in a frozen. Now you're working in a prison.
yeah,
What was that? What,
prison was difficult. You had to take a couple classes. You had to sign a form that basically said that if you ever get captured, they will not negotiate with terrorists in order to get you back, because that's what they would consider them at that point. So you were taking a risk at that point, but it was just, you know, you got used to it. You go in, it's always locked doors. You stand at the door and they open the door for you, and then they shut the door, and then you walk down the hallway, and then you go past all the down this hallway, and then my office was all the way in the back. It was cool because it was just me, and everybody was always freezing cold. So even in the summertime, I'd be walking around with a winter jacket on because it was so cold in my office. Because the same air that I was getting was what the inmates were getting. Because down the hallway, it was four big glass windows, and this is where they kept all the inmates. And then my office was right across from them. So, and I mean, only you walk out the hallway, it's only 5 feet across, and then you're right there at that. Then you see the. So I saw inmates all day long, um, walking around in their in the bunks and all that stuff, and watch them. They're you can't watch them not take showers and everything. So so you see that all day long. You see their behaviors all day long, and they were some of them were good people, and a lot of them were not. I worked in parole. Um, I did something where I collected these sheets that were called a sick call, where they would be given out to the inmates, and so they could fill it out, so they could be able to go see a doctor. And I became a person who was trying to help them, because again, they were people. They were just people who just made some bad choices in their lives. That's all. And I would always try to help them fill out the forms because they would write all these long stories on the forms, and they couldn't. The doctor had to read the freaking story for 20 minutes before, and it took so long for people to see the doctor because all these people writing stories, and I'd say, so let me see your form, and I'd look at it and go, oh, so I was, and they had, so they could go outside. I was outside and I was playing basketball and I went for a layup. And when I went for the layup, I missed the hoop and my buddies were laughing at me and all this other. And I fell down and I landed on my. I said, dude, just say you were outside playing basketball, you fell, you hurt your ankle. I said
No,
because if you have this.
he's got to tell you everything, all the details.
Oh yeah, if you put all the details in, it's going to take you 20 minutes, and you only have a couple of minutes with the doctor, so he's not going to be able to see you if you keep doing this. So just write,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, Mr. Dan, okay, Mr. Dan. So yeah. But I learned so much from being in that place. I had seen so much. I went down into medical one time because it was right down the hall, and I'd go in there, and all the guards would call me Weird Dan. Hey, Weird Dan, because this one guy called me Weird Dan because he thought I was strange, but I was. But um, first they called me Crazy Dan, then they would call me Weird Dan because of something later on that was happening with me. Um, so I went down there, and there was a guy sitting in there, and I would always tell the people when they would leave, I'd get them their records, and then the nurses would get their medications for them. And I was always helping the nurses do a lot of stuff. They never helped me, but I was always helping them. I was just that kind of person. Um, so I go in there, and there's a guy sitting in there, and I was talking to the one nurse, so just her and I in there that day, and I sat down in this chair, and I said, you get ready to leave? He said, yeah, Mr. Dan, I'm getting out of here now. Big guy, probably 6'5", probably 250 pounds, huge guy. Um, a little bit slow upstairs, up in here. But whatever. But a really nice kid. Really, he was around 25 years old, but just acted like he was 12. So, but really nice kid. Really, really, he was always nice to me. So when I sat, I said, "So you're leaving?" He said, "Yeah, I'm getting out of here, Mr. Dan." So what are you going to do when you get out? Oh, probably just hang out with my friends, play some video games. And I said, are you going to get something to eat? Because Fish Friday doesn't smell like fish in here. He's like, yeah, I think I'm going to go to Arby's and get a sandwich or something. I said, awesome, man, that's great, cool. And then here comes the CO, and he goes, okay, it's time to go. And he looks at me and he says, okay, Mr. Dan, I got to go. And I always give everybody the same bit of advice. I even do it on my own podcast. I say, be good and don't do any stupid shit. But if you do, don't get caught. And he's like, okay, I won't. So, but I'm serious. But he walked down the hallway. They didn't even get 10 steps. And he turned around and said something to the guard, and the guard jumped on top of him. He started wrestling him to the ground. He sprayed him with the pepper spray. They call it Capstone. It's so thick when it hits the ground, looks like chocolate, and it turns a grown man into a baby that quick. Your snot's pouring out, and you're just freaking out because you can't see. And he called the code, and they all come running down, and they're tackling this guy. And then we're closing the doors because once they spray that stuff, it just permeates the whole building, and we're choking and stuff like that. That's another thing you just have to get used to when you're there. Um, and you get used to seeing these types of things going on all the time. And they hog tie him and bring him down to the receiving again. And then I go down there later after we're done choking, and I said, "What happened there?" He said he came out of that office and he got down the hallway with me. And he looked at me and said, "I'm killing myself and I'm taking you with me." It was
Wow.
at that moment that I knew you never know what's going through anyone's mind. You just
No,
don't.
you don't.
This guy was talking, have a regular conversation with me, and for all I know, he could have been screaming inside, just trying to get out. Just didn't. He was trying to figure out what was going to happen to him next because he knew he couldn't take care of himself. So he did what he had to do to go into survival mode to stay in prison because they were feeding him and he had housing and all that stuff. So he figured out that quick. So yeah, and then I saw him again. Like 6 8 months later, he was still in. Because they had moved him, and they moved him back. And then I know he was. I saw him down in receiving again with this woman who I knew, who was a psych professional who was doing an evaluation on him, and she said something to him, and he didn't like what he said, and he stood up and said, "Boom!" Knocked her right out.
Wow.
And then they put him back over in the in the evaluation spot over in the infirmary over across the street in Big Boy Prison because there was another part of the prison that's Big Boy Prison where they keep all the rapists and murderers and all that stuff. And I had to go over there all the time as well. Even my very first time over there, when I was being trained, I was working with a woman, and she took me around to all the cell blocks to get all the sick calls. And one of those cell blocks you walked in, this is where all the murderers were. And they opened the door for us. They opened one door, you walk in, boom. And then you wait till they open the next door, and you go through. And then we go down the hallway and open this door, click, and go in. And we walk through, and now we have to go over to this box that's across the room. And it's all these guys walking around that just got done taking showers, or nobody has a towel on. They're all walking around. It's me and two nurses, these two other medical people. And we walk in, and all of a sudden I hear, boom. And I was like, the door's shut. And I turned around. I was like, oh crap, the door's shut. And then all those men in there, instead of looking at me, focused in on those two women because they don't see women. And I looked at them and I said, keep your eyes on me. Let's go. Don't pay attention to them. Don't listen to them. Just pay attention to me. We walked over to the box, got the sick calls out. We walked over, and then one of the inmates actually came up to me and he said, oh, the door's shut. He said, I'll get that for you. I said, huh? And he walked over to the door and went to the keypad, went, boop, 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 boop. There you go, man. Go ahead out. And I was like, huh? But I
Excuse
mean,
me?
this is, yeah, but I mean, there's no way no one was getting out because you had to go down a hallway and then go through other locked doors. So, but I mean, yeah. And then it was maybe 3 years after that, 5 years after that, when they had a big incident at another prison, and we went into lockdown mode because they captured some people, killed them right away too, unfortunately. But but yeah, that was life in prison. I saw unimaginable things.
I could
The things
imagine.
that everyone who thinks they know is going on in prison, like on the television shows and stuff, that's not what's going on there. But you, they, some people in there just have no regard for life whatsoever and don't care what they do and don't care about other people and they treat you horribly and you just have to, you got that term, suck it up, buttercup. I mean, there wasn't very many men in my profession in working in prisons, mostly women nurses, but there was a couple of men nurses and then me medical records. But yeah, your life changes working in there. But again, they're just people who they just made some bad choices for themselves and they got themselves in this situation. But some of those people in there, you don't want them on the street. You don't want them out on the street. These people just have no regard for life whatsoever. Life is a big party to them, and these are grown men. So yeah, you learn a lot of. I think I saved a guy one time. Um, I was walking down the hallway, getting ready to leave to go home, and when I came up on that last pod, there was a guy sitting on the top bunk, and he had the sheet, and he was turning the sheet into a noose, and he was trying to wrap it around the heating bed up above it. And then I ran down the hallway and got the yelled to the guards and got them to go in there and say the guy he was about to hang himself. So I don't know.
So Crazy Dan wasn't looking so crazy after he saved him.
No, I mean the guards treated me regular. I mean they called us because we were we were under a different contract than them, so they called us visitors. But the scariest situation I'd ever been in over there lasted about 5 minutes. I had to go over to Big Boy prison and bring some records over. So I go over to the opening station. You give them your ID. They knew me. Then you go in. And then you go in another room, and then that's the big room, and you walk in, and this is where they they wand you, and then you give them all your stuff. You put it in a box. It runs through a machine. You have your lunch bag is a clear lunch bag, so they can see everything in it, and that goes through, and then you walk through. I have scrubs on. That's it. You can't have anything else on you. Go through, and then they wand you. That's it. And okay, here's your stuff. Good. See you later, Dan. And I go down the hallway, and the big first door opens up. You stand there, and they open up the door. You go in, and it takes a long time. So everyone knows you're not expected to be any place real quick because it takes a long time to get through prison. And then they open up the second door. I walk through, and it shuts. Then I go down this hallway, and then there's this guard station there, and there's a door there. So, and you're going past. There's a library on the right-hand side, and you go through the door. They open up the door, click, and you walk in, and then boom, it shuts. And then you wait for them to open the next door so you can go outside, and that's where the yard is, where they all have they play baseball and they have weights and all that stuff like a prison. But there's a big fence around that, big tall fence with barbed wire on top of it, so you're not next to them, but they are walking around in that area where I am at, but they're always being escorted. So they open that door. I go in. There's this woman in there, and she opens the door for me. I go in. I'm standing there, waiting for her to open the next door. She walked away, and I'm standing there for like 5 minutes, and then she comes back up. She doesn't see me because she didn't even look at me. She sees all these other inmates on the other door waiting to come in to go see everybody for like visitation. She opens that door up. And then 20 inmates walk into that room with me. Now, in prison, you're not supposed to be in any room with them. That's against the rules. And it happened once in a great while, but not too often, but by mistake. Well, this lady wasn't paying attention to me. She opened that friggin' door, and these 20 inmates walk in. So what did I do for the next 3 or 4 minutes? I stood there and stared at my shoes because I don't want to say shit. Because now I'm in a locked room with 20 inmates, and then one of those inmates says to another guy, "When we get back, man, I get back in my cell. I'm killing my inmate. I'm killing my cellie. I'm killing him." And he's like, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, I found a knife outside." So I'm done with this guy. I'm taking him out. And I'm going, "Oh shit." And I'm just standing there. And luckily they don't even notice me because I'm packed in a small room. Like this room here is maybe by, I don't know, 12, 13 feet wide, and it's about 10 feet across. So I'm in a room that big with 20 people. So we're all stuffed in there. Like I said, I'm just staring at my shoes going, "Oh, shit." And then finally they open that door. They open the door that leads them into the room where they go and see all their peeps. And then when they do that, they see me standing in the room, the guard, and it's this other guy, and he's like, what are you doing in there? You're not supposed to be in there. And then that's when I freak out. I said, how is this my fault? I said, it's her frickin' fault. She let me in the door. She walked away. She came back 5 minutes later, didn't even look at me, and opened the other door and let them all in here. And he's screaming at me, you're not supposed to be in there. You're gonna go. I said, yeah, I could get killed, but it's her freaking fault. She's the one who opened that, walked away, and she's the one who let them in there. Well, I don't know why the hell you're screaming at me, because this isn't my fault. How can I do any of this? I'm sitting in a freaking room. And he's like, oh, you're going to get in trouble. I said, no, you're going to get in trouble, buddy. You're going to get in trouble. I'm not the one who's in charge. You people are in charge. You're going to get in trouble. And he's and then he started saying so, and then I started cursing a whole bunch. Like I said, you need to shut that up, buddy, and you need to do your goddamn job, and all this stuff. And he's like, you don't talk to me that way. You're a visitor here. I said, oh, I'm talking to you that way. I said, if you're that bad, why don't you come in this room with me? We'll discuss it then. And he's like, oh, he's a big fat guy. And I was like, and then I walk out. Finally, they let me out. I'm walking. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, you're gonna kill me in here. And I go, and then my boss is there. She says, Daniel, can I speak? Sure, Joe. I walk in the office. I said, what's up? She said, were you just in a locked room with about 20 inmates? I said, yes, I was. She said, what took place? And I said, the young lady with the blonde hair, not young, let me in the room. And then she left. And she said, what do you mean she left? I said, she walked away. She walked away from her post. She came back about 5 minutes later. She didn't look at me. She saw the other inmates over there by the door. She opened the door and let them all in. She said, she let them in. I said, yeah. What happened then? I said, I stood there and stared at my shoes for about 3 minutes because I heard one of the guys saying he's going to kill somebody. And she said, what? Can you describe that guy? Oh, of course I can. I was 2 people away from him. And he said he had a knife on him he found in the yard, a butter knife, and he's going to kill somebody. And she's like, are you okay? I'm like, how am I supposed to be? I mean, really, how am I supposed to be, Jill? She said, you don't look like you're, like, I said, oh, you can't tell, but I'm shaking inside. I said, that was the moment where you don't want to be. I said, well, I was there, so what am I supposed to do? I started choking up. I said, what am I supposed to do? I can't be at this freaking job and have those kinds of things happen. I said, and I said, and then the other guard was screaming and yelling at me. And I told him, if he didn't like it, why don't you come in the room with me and we'll have to talk then. I said, I'll kick your ass. I think you're screaming and yelling at me. I said, you're not doing your freaking job. And they said, yeah, that he said you were screaming at him. I said, because he was screaming at me. Of course I was screaming at him because this other person let all those inmates come into this door with me. And I'm in a room with 20 inmates, and one guy's telling he's going to kill somebody. Of course I'm screaming, Joe. Why wouldn't I? And I just looked at her. I said, I'm here to do this job, but I can't do this job under this kind of circumstances. I mean, this is ridiculous. And how did these people get away with that? I said, and he's trying to blame me because he says it's my fault. How's it my fault when they are the ones that let me in the place and they're the ones who let me out of the place? How do I have control over that? She said, I know, I understand. She said, I'll have to have a talk with the warden. I said, I don't give a fuck who you talk to. I really don't. But this is not, and if you want to fire me over this, go ahead and fire me. I don't care. But you'll see me in court because this is ridiculous. I said, I got to go. I got to do my job. Have a great day. And I just walked out of the office. Nothing came of it. I mean, we're going to suspend you from this place. And that never happened. So, because they knew they were wrong. But they don't like to admit they're wrong because they're the ones who are in charge. So, but yeah, that was a scary moment. That was probably my scariest moment there ever.
Now, some people are probably wondering, Did you have the rock star hair? Did you have the rock star hair going on?
No, I had
Or
this. Yeah, I
you were
had
bald?
no. My hair was a little bit longer. It eventually got shorter and shorter and shorter, and then I actually have a full head of hair. I mean, you can hear that. So I just shaved it yesterday because I was on another podcast yesterday. I have another one to do later on today. Yeah, no, I did not have the rock star. I look like this. Yeah, this with a pair of scrubs on. That's all. Because we all had to conform, look like each other. We all had to have the same color scrubs. I mean, I was walking out that same place to go across the street and go in past that yard, and I had a guy run up to me up to the fence. He said, hey Doc," and I'm like, "Yeah, what's up, buddy?" And he says, "Oh, I got a pain with my arm. I got this pain in my arm. How can I fix it?" I said, "I don't know, buddy. I don't know anything about elbows." I said, "I'm a gynecologist, but I'll take a look at it for you." And he went, "What?" And then all his buddies started laughing, and then I started laughing at him. He said, "Oh, you're joking with me?" I said, "Yeah, man, I'm not a doctor." So yeah, but yeah, I knew a lot of the inmates over there too after a while because a lot of them were there so long. And then, "Hey, Dan, how's it going?" You know, they always want to talk because there was somebody else to talk to because they didn't have a lot of people to talk to. So, and there was one guy I would always see all the time who was out there. He was in there. He died in there. He was in there for a long time. He was the gardener. He was a gardener. He'd go past, and I mean, the flowers were just beautiful. This guy knew what he was doing. Hey, how's it going, Mr. Jackson? Doing pretty good. How about you? Pretty good, man. All right, all right. And I'd talk to him a little bit, and then I'd be on about my way. But yeah, you got you just got used to it. But you always knew where you were because some people were just horrible and treated you horrible. I've always saw them treat everyone else horrible. The inmates never really treated me horrible. I don't know why. Maybe because I was a man. But they always treated all the women horribly. And then I would talk to them because they would say something about this particular guy, that particular guy. "Oh, he's horrible. You got to watch what you say to him," and stuff like that. And then I'd walk up to him, "Hey, man, how's it going?" "Oh, pretty good. How about you?" So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I met a guy in there who had a thing going on where he would eat metal because he said he had this thing going on inside of him that if he didn't, he had to have something metal in his mouth because if it didn't, it drove him crazy. So the taste of it. So he would eat metal, but come to find out, he had 12 years to do there and 13 years to do up in Pennsylvania. He didn't want to be in prison, even though he was in for armed robbery. He told me the story. And he would always do everything he could to get out of prison, to be out of prison. So he would eat metal. He'd find wire or something like that, and he would eat this stuff so he could go to the hospital and have a surgery so he would be out of prison because he didn't like being in prison. So he ended up with a colostomy bag. There was one time when he got a hold of a toothbrush and a spork, and he shoved the spork. He took the tube out and shoved the spork up inside of him and used the toothbrush to shove that inside of him to have a surgery. And he would pull wire out of the sockets and all that stuff. But they eventually had to put him into a room where he couldn't have anything. So, but he eventually passed away from being there because they found a paper clip and a penny inside of his stomach that eroded so much that it rotted his stomach away. So,
wow.
Yeah. But he was always very nice to me. Very nice to me. Wasn't so nice with everybody else, but very nice to me. I have this kind of I have this kind of demeanor in there. So I just am who I am. I see people who they are. I treat them as they treat me. That's it. That's all. I'm not in there to make any enemies or anything like that. The only other scary situation I did have was I was out on my motorcycle and I was meeting up with these club members at this gas station. And when I showed up there was a guy there who was an inmate there. Now I can't say his name, but he came up to me and I said, what are you doing there, man? And he said, oh, they let me out. He said, I'm on house arrest. I said, if you're on house arrest, why are you here? And he said, oh, they let us out. We're allowed to go out certain hours of the day to get things done, like, because we got to, he says, I got medications I got to take. I was like, I get it. All right. Yeah. And then he wanted to talk to me for a while. I said, man, I don't have time to talk to you. I'm not supposed to be talking to you. I got to go over here. And then I saw him again 2 weeks later. I was coming out of Walmart and I got on my motorcycle and I started riding down the road going to visit my mom because I was no longer living with her anymore. I'm married now. And on the way down to the house, I saw a car behind me blinking its lights at me and flashing the lights and honking the horn and yelling out the window. And I was like, who the hell is this? But I'm in a not so great motorcycle club. You never know. So I take off down the road and I get to my sister's house and I pull up in the driveway and I get off my bike and I turn around and there's that car at the end of the driveway and I go down and it's this guy again. And I said, what are you doing here? He's like, you're going to come with me. You're going to come with me. We're going to go to a coffee shop. You're going to come with me and you're going to help me figure out my life. Now, this guy was a rapist and this guy was a child molester. And he wanted me to come and help him figure out his life. Although he'd been in jail as of up until that point for 17 years. And he wants me, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. I said, what are you even doing here, man? You're not supposed to be talking to me. I'm not supposed to be talking. You got to get the heck out of here. And he's got two friends in the car. I'm like, and they start to get out, and I shut the door and I said, you're not getting out of the car. And I said, you need to get the heck out of here. You need to leave. I said, because now I have to tell the warden this. Because this is 2 times in 2 weeks you have now caught up with me. And I said, I know you're following me. So, no. I said, and he said, well, you're going to, I said, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to get out of that car. Because you get out of that car, I'm going to kick your ass in front of your 2 friends. And I looked at the one friend, I grabbed him. I said, you're not going to fucking move. You better stay right there. And he's, I said, get the hell out of here right now. I said, I'm calling the cops right now. And so they took off down the road. So the next, I had to go to work on Monday. I had to have a talk with the, I went in and told the commander, and I said, hey, I need to talk to a warden. Why? What's going on? I said, because somebody freaking followed me. And what? I said, yeah. And I said the guy's name. He said, no. I said, yeah, he followed me twice. I said, and so the warden came down to my office and he said, so you had somebody follow me? I said, yeah. And I told him, he said, yeah. He said, he's on house arrest until 2024. And this was back in 2017 when it happened. And I was like, well, he's not doing a very good job, warden. I said, and I said, he found me twice. So, and he goes, yeah, he didn't find you. He's following you. I said, yeah, he's following me. I don't need that kind of in my life, warden. I said, he said, well, don't worry, we're taking care of it. He said he's back in prison now. He's at another jail, and he's going to be in for a very long time. I said, okay. And I said, you think I should carry a firearm or something? He said, why aren't you? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you work here, don't you? I said, yeah. He said, you work here, you should be carrying a firearm because I'm sure you see a lot of these people out on the street. I said, I do. I see it. I've seen them before. They've come, hey, Mr. Jackson. I'm like, oh, shit, So he said, yeah. He said, absolutely, you should be carrying a firearm. He said, because you need to protect yourself, Mr. Jackson. I said, yeah, I do. I said, this is getting a little crazy. He said, yeah. He said, absolutely. He said, but don't worry about this incident. This guy's gone away for a long time. So I said, okay. So, yeah. What do you do at that point? So, yeah. But this is, again, this is what you agree to. When you go in there, you sign all those forms, you take the classes, and then I had to have a FBI background check done on me every 2 years. So, yeah. That was a crazy part of my life. But that part's over. I no longer work at the prison anymore. I'm now medically retired because I have these 4 screws in my back. My vision's always messed up. I've had multiple surgeries on my eyes just to be able to see. I'm losing the muscle mass in my hands. I'm missing I had, because of my diabetes, I went to a drum audition years before, and I had something, my foot was bothering me, and I ended up going to work, and then uh, I had a problem with my foot, and then my big toe went black and blue, and then ended up getting a bone infection, and they took off my big toe and the ball of my foot, my left foot. So I have to stand a certain way when I bend over, because if I regularly bend over, if you just come up and poke me, I'd fall right over because I have no balance whatsoever. So yeah, I'm medically on disability now.
So, so what are you doing now?
Um, when I said I had something going on in my life, my entire life, when I lived in New Jersey, we lived in a little town called National Park, New Jersey, and there was a battlefield there. This is where the Hessians fought. And my house was haunted. And so it was known, a lot of the other houses in that area, our next door neighbor, her house was haunted. She'd come over and say things to my mom, talk about the soldier man standing on the top of the stairs with blood dripping down his face and stuff. And we had a lot of incidences going on in the house. By the time I was 17, when my mom and dad and I moved to Delaware, I was the only one who was continuing to have these kinds of incidences. And I would see them on a frequent basis. I have seen spirit ever since I was 3 years old. I don't ever not see spirit now. I see, hear, feel, smell, sometimes taste. You don't want that part. And communicate with spirit every day of my life. I don't ever not see them. I also see into what we would call other dimensions, other realms, and I do something called remote viewing, but I don't turn it on. It just turns on. Um, but I don't ever not see spirit throughout my entire life. And then, and I was seeing them. I had some very strange experiences with my during the in my teens, my 20s. There was one time I was sitting with my girlfriend watching television. I was about 27, and we were watching Rocky Horror Picture Show. And then she was at the foot of the bed. I was at the other end, and then something came out of my closet. It was milky white, maybe about 4 feet long and 2 feet thick, and it just kind of snaked its way out of the closet and went across the room and disappeared. And she turned around and looked at me and was like, "Did you see that?" "Yeah, I saw that. Let's get the heck out of here." But that was a regular occurrence. I've seen when I was a kid, we had ashtrays moving around the house. My sister was getting ready for school one time in the bathroom with my mom, and she was helping do her hair. And they stood in front of a full-length mirror. When they did, there was another woman standing in the mirror in a colonial outfit. There was one time when my two brothers and I were watching TV downstairs, and my sister's record player, just as in the 70s, turned on. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was it was switching records. So it took a record off and put another one on. Apparently it liked Alice Cooper and Pink Floyd. So we would see these things, these shadows on the walls all the time, and move glasses and ashtrays and stuff around the house all the time. I was with a friend when I was a kid, and he wanted to see it, so he was hanging out at my house, and nothing was happening till we were eating some sandwiches, and then all of a sudden the stereo system just turned on, and the volume went right up to the top. So and he ran out of the house. I've seen so many spirit. He was whiter than any ghost I've ever seen in my life. But when he ran out of the house, yeah, this was happening all throughout my life, and I was always the guy who had a ton of ghost stories from my friends. I always had a ton of ghost stories, and then there was a time when I was with my ex-wife, we were still married. When I took my toe off, I had that Frankenstein boot that everybody wears, and I had to go to the mall because I was just tired of sitting around. So I went to the mall with her, and then I said I got to go to the bathroom. So we went up to the bathroom in Sears, and she stood outside, and I went into the bathroom, and I went and sat down. And when I did, a voice came out and said, "Everything's going to be okay, my son." And I was like, "Who's in this bathroom with me?" I looked around, there was nobody in there. And when I got out of there, I said to my wife, "Did anybody else come in the room?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Maybe it was God talking to you." I said, "Why would God be talking to me? I mean, I'm just a regular guy." So Um, and then there was another time I was out on my motorcycle coming home from work, and I had some music in my ears with some earbuds in them. And the music went slowed down, and then the voice came right through the flare and said, "Everything's gonna be okay, my son." And I pulled over, and I was like, "What the heck's going on here?" I couldn't. I tried to replay it, and I couldn't get it to come through. And I got home and tried to replay it. Um, I had seen other apparitions. I saw my grandmother one time when my grandmother had passed away in a rocking chair. I was in my grandfather's room, and we're looking at pictures, and I went to go to sleep, and I kept hearing this noise, and I wake up and look around, and one time I looked around, and she was actually in the rocking chair moving back and forth, and she just looked at me, her eyes got big and disappeared. So I've seen those kinds of things. I see shadow people standing outside of my bedroom, peeking in, looking at me, um, or standing in front of me, or I'd see the air would move. It looked like when you're outside on a summer day and you see the air move because of the heat. I saw it inside my house. And then as I would have some experiences still all the way through my life, and then right before turning 50 years old, my wife went away on vacation for 2 weeks, and then for those 2 weeks, I saw everything you could ever imagine in a scary movie like Poltergeist, but to the 10th power happening in my house for 2 weeks. Um, I saw green and red mist pouring out of the walls. I saw clouds coming out of the corner of the room. It was red, then green, and then yellow, and then blue, and then each night would change. Red with black stripes, green with black stripes, blue with black stripes. I saw 8-foot skeletons walking around the house. I saw. I let my cat down in the basement. My cat Shadow at the time. He would knock on the door so he could go down in the basement, and that's why I let him down. I went down one night this during this time period and to go get him. I said, "Come on, buddy, it's time to go." And he looked at me. He looked to his right. I looked to my left, and then I saw a wall of blackness appear in the middle of the floor. And then I saw a man walk out of it, and he walked out, and he had a big wide brimmed hat and a long black coat. I couldn't see his face in front, but I saw his nose and I saw his chin, and he walked across the floor and then walked through the wall and disappeared. The funny part for me was, again, because I saw so many spirit throughout my life, this was a normal thing, but this was just eerie. But when he was walking, he didn't have any feet. He just walked across the room in perfect stride and went right through the wall. And then I turned back, and that wall of blackness went shut. And my cat looked at me like, "What the hell was that?" And I was like, "I don't know. Let's go." I saw one time in bed, I saw a cloud form above the bed, and then it opened up into like a window of blackness, and then I saw these two skeleton arms come out, and then it pulled the head out and the body out, and I was looking around the room. And again, another strange part was when the arms came out that didn't have any hands, which was weird to me. Yeah, so this stuff was, I saw these little creatures coming out of the walls. I saw people in the distance coming through, and then they'd walk through that misty green red stuff, and it looked like a witch's cauldron. And I saw the really scary, like the monster in Poltergeist, that big. I saw one of those come out of the bedroom wall every night, and was making this screeching noise at me. And then my wife came home, and then she told me about her adventures, and then I told her about mine. Now, she had known prior to some of the stories I had for her before, but this was different. And then she kind of contemplated our relationship at that point, because we had just been together for about a year. And then for about 3 days, then she started seeing some of the same things in the house. And orange orbs floating around the house, and blue orbs, and this big. We would be sitting there watching TV, and we'd look in the bedroom, and you'd see these things floating around the room, and then you'd see this big white like veil cloud just go right across the room and wipe the room clean, and then it'd be okay for a little while, and then they would come back around. We saw skulls floating around with red eyes and fangs floating around the rooms. So we did like anybody else. We went on the internet and tried to find some things to help us. I went out and looked up a couple different paranormal groups. We had one come to the house, and they pulled up in their van and they had a little insignia on the side, and I just thought to myself at that moment, I don't, I don't want to be this kind of famous, because everyone's going to think they have some type of, Blair Witch Project going on next to their house. Unfortunately for them, they did. And so they came to the house. They did a big investigation. It was a guy with a video camera, a guy asking questions, a guy setting up um, mechanical stuff, and a guy and a girl taking pictures, digital photographs. And she took pictures of me and or me with somebody else or just other people and things around the room. And she called me over, one of the guys over, and said, "Yeah, look at this." And I walked over and I said, "What do you see?" And she's like, "Well, I'm really not supposed to tell you until the end, Mr. Jackson, to do a big review, and we'll come back." And she said, "But you got to see this." And I was like, "Okay." And she showed the pictures. And every time there was a picture of me or me with someone else, there was 15 or 20 light orbs completely surrounding me. Everyone else, nothing. The guys, they set up these little boxes with lights on it and wires. Um, and I said, "What's that doing?" Because I watch ghost shows, So I mean, I've seen so many spirit. I've watched ghost shows, but this guy said, "Oh, they produce static electricity." So he rubbed his hand on the couch and he waved it by the box, and it lit up and bloop, bloop, and this noise. And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." He said, "Yeah, whenever they walk by, these things are going to light up." Okay, so he placed them all around the room, and he placed some in front of the doorways, and they asked me, "Where do you have most of the activity going on?" I said, "I don't know, pick a spot," because it's throughout the entire house. And well, let's go in the bedroom. Okay, I walk through the doorway. Every one of those boxes go bloop, bloop, light up. I turn around, look at them, and they're looking at me like, and I'm like, "Okay." And they walk through the door. Nothing happened for them. We walked in. One guy said, "Let's go in the closet." So walk-in closet. Yeah, we go in. He's got a video camera. He looks at me. "I'm gonna get sick." And I said, he runs out. I was like, "You okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm okay. Can we go back in?" Sure. I go back in. 2 seconds in, he's turned around. "I'm gonna get sick again." He runs out, sits on the bed, and I said, "You all right?" He said, "Yeah." "How come you're not getting sick?" I said, "I don't know. You're the expert. You tell me. I don't know what the problem is." So we walk out of the bedroom. I walk out first. They all light up again. They look at me like I'm strange. They walk through. Nothing. They did all kinds of tests throughout the home. One of the tests they did was they had me go back into the bedroom. It was getting dark out and late at night, and they wanted me to pretend I was sleeping. So they wanted to capture whatever they could. So that I laid in bed, pretended I was sleeping. They walked in the room, and about 10 minutes later, they came in with something called an Ovilus, which is a spirit box. They turned it on, and immediately when they turned it on, it started spitting out words, but it was in a different language. And they said, "Oh, wait, we got to fix the button." And then as soon as they fixed that button, it started spitting out words. It said, "Wendy, Michael, Paul, Helen, unique, special, energy, light." And then it said the word road, like a street said road. And when it did that, a car went past my house. And I was like, "What's going on here?" And then they started asking questions, and they timed it. They did it for 10 minutes exactly. And every time they asked a question, it immediately answered. And one of the questions I remember them asking, they said, "Are you here to harm Daniel?" And then there was a computer voice that came through and said, "No, we are not here to harm Daniel. We love Daniel. We love Daniel's light. Daniel is the light." When it said Daniel is the light, I said, I'm thinking, what the heck is that? What's that supposed to mean? I'm the light. And then they got done and walked out of the room. And then I walked out. My wife was standing there. They were standing in a big huddle. And I said, "My wife, what's going on?" She said, "I don't know, but something." And they turned around. I said, I was excited because they were seeing everything my wife and I were experiencing. And I was glad that someone else was. And I at that point no longer felt like I was going crazy because I was seeing so much. I mean, it was going on for 5-6 months before they even got to the house, So, so I said, "You got all that, right? I mean, that was great, right?" And they said, "Well, there's an issue, Mr. Jackson." I said, "What's the issue?" It wasn't bad or anything. It was okay. And he said, "Well, whenever we use that box, Mr. Jackson, we can get it to spit out a word or two. I said, okay. He said, it never says sentences. And it says sentences for 10 minutes. He said, there wasn't even a pause there. We asked a question, it answered like that. I said, all right. He said, oh, we were having an intelligent conversation. We got to figure this out because we don't experience this ever. I said, okay. So what am I supposed to do until you guys come back? We'll come back in 2 weeks with big reveal. But here, I'm going to give you. Do you have a computer? I said, yeah, we have a laptop in here. And they said, okay, well, let's set that up. I'm going to show you some different sites to go to. So if anything happens, still, you just play this and it'll say some prayers out and that'll make it go away. And then they handed me a bottle of water, a spray bottle. I said, what's that? He goes, oh, it's holy water. I was like, oh, okay. Turns out it's just water because a man can't bless water. Can't bless you or can't tell you to submit your sins to them either because you're a divine soul. Everyone is. It's just people aren't. But he says, if anything happens, just spray the water on. So I was sitting there spraying water on the wall, and we were putting salt around the room. The only thing that does is make your room salty. It doesn't do anything because these are non-physical beings. They're not affected by these things. Sage doesn't do anything because you're thinking that sage is going to make these things go away. That's not real. I mean, the smoke it's not going to transpose into a non-physical realm of which it's not going to affect a being that doesn't have lungs and smell and doesn't breathe. So
that's what I'm thinking too. Doesn't it actually attracts them more when you like the sage?
Oh, they laugh at it. They tell me.
They're like, okay.
They think it's funny. Yeah, because Spirit talks to me all the time. So they left. They said they'll be back 2 weeks later. They never came back. I got a hold of them finally 6 weeks later, and I said, when you going to come back? And he said, I can't get the team together. I said, why not? He said, oh, they quit when they got on your front lawn after we left. He said, we don't get this kind of information from one house, Mr. Jackson. This takes 10 or 15 homes to get what we got from your house. And they don't want to come to your house. I said, well, can you come? He said, oh, I don't feel comfortable coming to your house. I said, well, how are you going to help me? He said, I don't know. I can't. I said, right, you're not helping me. So I eventually found some mediums. I found 5 of them. None of them knew each other. Every one of them told me the same story about me. One of them told me she wanted me to come to her show to see how she does it. And I was like, okay. So I bought some tickets. My wife and I went. And when we went, we walked in the door, and then she was on the stage. There was like 50, 60 people in there. And then she locked eyes with me, and then watched me and my wife as we walked through the room and sat down. And my wife said, did you see that? That was kind of creepy. I said, yeah. She said, did you tell her we were coming? I said, no, I just bought tickets to the closest show, and here we are. So we're sitting there. She tells the group of people how she does things. She gets pictures in her mind. Spirit will show her things. Spirit will come in, show her things. And she said, there's this one spirit who's here with me right now. He keeps trying to come to the front of the line, but there's another one here, so I got to talk to that one first. And this man won't leave me alone. I keep telling him. Everybody's kind of laughing and chuckling and stuff. So she says the one spirit, and this one woman stands up. Says, yeah, because she says, just if it equates to anybody in the room, just stand up and let me know, and we'll go forward with it. So that's what she did. It equated to this woman. So the next one, they said, okay, I'm going to finally let this guy out. She talks about him, and the same girl stands up. Oh, I think that's my Uncle Bob, because his name was Bob, but Robert, but Bob. And he wears flannel shirts and a business suit and T-shirts on the weekend. And she said, I think that's my Uncle Bob. And then she said, well, he said he fell down and that's how he passed away. And she said, no, maybe that's not him. And then the woman said, look, I know everybody here wants every spirit in the room to be equated to them, but that's just not the way that it is. And so I stood up. And I said, yeah, that's my dad. His name is Bob, but he goes, I'm Robert, but Bob. And he wears the T-shirts and flat, but he wears a business suit. I said, he fell down. That's the way he passed away. And she said, how? I said, he was working in the basement, and he fell down going up a flight of steps, and it moved his brainstem. And she said, yes, that's what he's saying. And she said, who is Sarah? And I said, Sarah, my niece? She said, no, Sarah had to make the big decision. And I went, oh, that's my mom. Your mom's name is Sarah? Sort of. My mom's name is Joan. Her middle name is Sarah. Not many people know that. I do. And I said, my mom was the one who had to make the big decision to have the doctors pull the plug because my dad was gone. So, and then she said, he's showing me a picture of a school bus and looks like someone wearing like medical scrubs and I see prison bars. I said, yeah, that's me. I went to school for medical records and now I work in prison doing medical records. So she proceeded, and then at the end of the show, after everyone else has read, I said to my wife, I said, we got to go down and talk to this lady. So I went down on stage, and people standing around, and she said, hi, how are you? I said, my name is Daniel Jackson. And she said, oh, we spoke on the phone like a couple weeks ago. I said, yes. And then she looked at me like I was 7 years old. And she said, stay here, don't move, wait till everybody leaves. You and I need to talk. And I was like, oh, crap. Like, what did I do, So everybody leaves, and then she looks at me and she said, so I understand you see a lot of spirit. And I said, lady, it's like being in a room with 1,000 people, except nobody leaves and more just keep coming in. It's that kind of bad. She said, but they're coming to you. And I said, what do you mean they're coming to me? She said, they're coming to you. She said, and as I know now, spirit sees you. When they see you, they see your body frame and they see a light inside of you. That's your soul. They see that. I said, yeah, okay. She said, well, yours is really bright. I said, okay, what's that supposed to mean? She said, oh, it's the brightest one I've ever seen in my life. She said, I've been doing this for 20 years. She said, I've never seen anybody like you. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, I could feel you on the other side of the room. You walked through that door and I saw you. I said, yeah, my wife and I thought that was kind of creepy. You followed me through the room. She said, yeah. She said, because you don't look like a human being. I said, what do I look like? She said, you look like a figure of a human being, but you look like a light bulb, like in a movie Cocoon where they're walking around, you see the aliens all lit up. She said, that's what you look like. And I was like, and what's that supposed to mean? She said, well, that's why spirit's coming to you. I said, why would they be coming to me? She said, because they think that you're the light into heaven, Daniel. And I said, what's that supposed to mean? She said, they want you to help them. To do what? She said, to cross them over, Daniel, go to heaven. Not everybody does. And I was like, yeah, I kind of get that, but why me? She said, because you're chosen for this. I was like, what do you mean I'm chosen? She said, you need to have a sit-down talk with God. You have to decide if you're going to move forward with this or not. And I said, move forward with what? She said, oh, Daniel, you're just an untrained medium. That's all you are. You just don't know it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. She said, no, I'm not kidding you. That's why this is all happening. It's happening now because it has to happen now for you now. You need to wake up and have this talk with him. And I was like, okay. And she said, I know you don't want it to go away, do you? I said, no, it's been part of my life, but I got to get it figured out because I got so much I'm seeing. She said, you have a talk with him. You'll get it figured out. You're either going to move forward with this and become a medium or you're not. I was like, and so my wife and I are driving home and I'm like, I'm becoming a medium. I mean, what does that even mean? She said, like the one on TV. I said, like John Edwards or something like that. And she said, yeah. I was like, no. what are we doing here? So we got home, we talked about it some more, and I said, I guess I got to go have this talk with God. And my wife puts things into perspective for me. And always chokes me up. I said to her, how do I have a talk with God? What do I say? And she said, how do you talk to him any other time? I said, I just talk to him. She said, well, then that's what you do. Go in the bedroom and have a talk with him. But I said, so she said, this is your decision. This is something you got to do for you. I mean, I'm your wife and I will support you, but this is something you got to get figured out for yourself. So I went in the bedroom, I turned out the lights, and I just basically I said, God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. if you help me figure this out, I was at my wits' end at that point. I was at rock bottom, and I said I was nervously kind of sick because I was shaking the whole entire time. I was like, I'll go wherever you want me to go, or whatever you want me to be, or wherever you want me to be. I'll do whatever you want me to do. But if you help me, I'll help these souls. I'll help people. I'll do whatever you want. But you got to help me figure this out because I don't know what I'm doing here. I said, this is driving me crazy. It's driving us crazy. Our life is different. And I said, I need to get this figured out. I can't live this kind of different way anymore. But if you help me, I'll do whatever you want me to do. So I got done. I walked out of the room and I said to my wife, I said, okay, we'll see what happens. And she said, what'd you tell him? I said, and then I told her, and she said, okay. Well, if that's what you have to do, then that's what we'll do. I'll support you. I said, okay. And then everything just started to change. And it took a few months, but I stopped seeing all the crazy skulls and skeletons and all that stuff. And then I started seeing people and animals. And now I don't see, there's not a moment in my life I never not see something. I see people, dogs, cats, horses, cows, fish. I see other beings from other worlds. Again, I see in other dimensions, other realms, remote view. I do some other things that I don't talk to people about because it'll scare them. It scares me. And spirit talk to me all the time. But not just them. I'm in communication with what we would refer to, and I say that because of who told me that. What we refer to as archangels. That's who guides me. They provide me answers. They touch me on my face for yes and no answers. This is yes. I feel that going right across my forehead. And then I feel this. Feels like a tear running down my eye, and that's no. That was a trial and error thing I found out while working in prison. I had to ask them questions because another medium told me this is what was happening. I said, is that what that is? I thought it was a bug walking across my face all the time. She said, no, your guides are actually rolling their eyes at you because you're not figuring it out. But so now I have it figured out. At the time, I was getting touched here for yes and here for yes, and then one spot for no. Now I get touched in here for no and here for no. I got another one here when there's danger around me. They alert me of that. And in the beginning, it was just those two touches, one here for yes. At this point right now, it's 111. I get touched in 111 different places on my face and head by 111 different archangels. I know exactly who's doing it and when. And they don't just touch me on my face anymore. Now they also put information in my mind. And it's, as they're touching me, the information's coming in. It's just a knowing. It's just there every single time. In the beginning, that was happening 5% of my day. Now it's 98% of my day. It never turns off. It never goes away. I'm always experiencing this all the time. Even looking into this camera, I'm seeing spirit. I'm seeing my guides around me. I see just little sparkles of light that are going around my face in front of me all day long. I actually see what angels look like. They're not men with wings and shields and swords, or they're not magical beings that are going to fix your life. I mean, if you had a guardian angel following you around, guarding you from everything in your life, what would you learn? Nothing. If you had why would a guardian angel keep you from getting sick with cancer but not keep your dog from getting hit by a car? Because they don't do either. Because there's no such thing. You don't have a guardian angel following you around, guarding you from everything. What we do have is we do have spiritual guides who are once other beings or people who have crossed over, who fulfilled their purpose. And then they come back here to be guides for us. And you also have your intuition, gut feelings, because we get these gut feelings that we can't explain, but I know what it is. But it's those feelings that when you say, something's telling me I shouldn't go in there. Well, what do you think that something is? And how come you've never investigated what that something is? That something is your soul trying to talk to you. I also see into the low energy realm, what people think is hell. And sometimes when I see into that place, I see what looks like the worst horror movie you've ever seen in your life, except you can't see this kind of movie because they wouldn't show it in television movies. And it's that kind of bad, but not everything there is bad. You go there for a couple of different reasons. One, you got lost and you didn't know where to go. Or two, you just made a choice to go in there because you know that if you go into heaven, there's a possibility you might have to come back and relive another life again, and you know that. So sometimes they don't want to do that. They want to stay there. but you are susceptible to all the horrible negative energies that are trying to get control of you to take your energy from you. I see that place every day, but I'm not seeing it. Seeing it. My soul is different than everyone else's. When that woman said that I'm the light, and Spirit says I'm the light, they're not kidding. My soul has been here the longest. My soul is actually the light into heaven to guide Spirit over. They can either go in themselves or they need to be talked to, and they come to me and I guide them through. My archangels provide me information because the Spirit asks me questions all the time. Even if a dog talks to me, I hear everything is English. They ask me questions. I get answers from archangels. I give it to them, and then I guide them through. Does everyone want to cross over? No. As many that crossed over into heaven, there's that many that don't. But again, that lower place and even heaven is not filled with just human beings, because not everything is just from this world. And I see all of it. I see into heaven. I see into that place. But again, I'm not just seeing it. I'm there because they interact with me. Now I do readings for people. I do what's called an angel reading. Again, I'm not necessarily the one who communicates with your mom and dad who passes away, but your mom and dad is not there to pat you on the back from heaven. They don't do that. That's just a myth. They're there trying to get you, knowing that you have spirit guides. You're supposed to listen, trust, and follow through with what they tell you to do. They give you options and choices, but you have to decide if you're going to follow through with those choices to get you on the correct path so you'll learn all your lessons, but also fulfill your purpose. Purpose is not becoming a doctor, or a lawyer, or a teacher. It's not an occupation, because not everyone has an occupation. Our purpose is we're here to help each other just for the sake of helping, not because you can, but because you should. In a way, we're going to do something for someone that they cannot physically possibly do for themselves. You're helping them to figure it out. Like if a dog, even if it's a dog, it's a person or it's all of God's creation. If a dog's in the middle of the street, you go over and get the dog and help the dog get out of the middle of the street because you're afraid it's going to get hit by a car. Some people say, "Oh, I'll do that," and some people go, I don't have time for that. I'm late for work. Well, if you're late for work, get up earlier. It's pretty simple. But doing a purpose is actually a choice, whether you're not going to do it. Lessons is everything you're going to do in your life, but fulfilling your purpose is a choice. And people keep coming back here and over again because they don't do it enough. Because this is what He wants us to do. There's that term that says, "God bless you." He did. He put you here. He wants us to figure out the rest. We're just not doing a very good job. But yeah, so I do readings for people. I do a live show on TikTok talking about spirit and spirituality, and I answer questions for people. I do some readings. I do personal readings. A reading with me is for 2 hours, not like most readers who charge $450 an hour, and then if you go over that hour, they start charging you more. I don't. It's $150 for 2 hours, and I'm always freaking spot on. I do in-person readings up in Tucson, Arizona. I'm doing one on the 18th in Tucson, and I'm always at the busiest table, and I get everything right. I always keep a box of tissues there because when I get done, I close my eyes and tell them what I see around them. When I open my eyes, they're bawling their eyes out because I know, and I tell them what's going on in their lives because not a lot of times I see spirit animals with them. Spirit animal will act out for me what that person's doing in their life, and I will describe that to them when I open my eyes. They're crying their eyes out because they know I'm right, and I get it right, and I get a lot of things that come through that I'm here to help them. I give them peace of mind and clarity, but also give them direction in their lives to help them get through so they can learn the lessons, fulfill the purpose, go home and stay home and not come back and do this all over again. I'm trying to get them all to go home because this is what God wants me to do. And I always say that I work for God. That's what I do. That's all I do now. This is my life. Just seeing spirit, talking to them, communicating with them. And when I say see, hear, feel, smell, sometimes taste, when I say that, sometimes taste, that's because a negative energy will come through. I have seen the worst of the worst. They talk to me. They don't like me very much because they know who I work for. They all know me. And when that comes through, it's when a negative energy comes through and wants to show its dominance towards me, and then he puts something in my mouth that tastes like someone threw up in my mouth.
Wow.
But like I said, some spirit will print in memories on me. I had a dog come to me one time, and I thought it was remote viewing because I saw a dog playing with two people, a woman and a man, and he's rubbing up against the woman, and he's playing fetch with the man. And then all of a sudden that went away, and then the dog looked me in the eyes and asked me when his mom and dad were coming home. And I had to tell him, it's going to be okay, honey. It's going to take a while, but they'll be home soon. And he said, okay, and he turned around and walked the other way. But I still have that memory inside of me that's never going away. So,
Yeah, it lives what you
um,
know.
yeah, when you're a medium, it's not just about getting answers. It's about the responsibility of giving those answers, because with great power comes with great responsibility, and you have to give some answers that sometimes you don't have to want to tell people. I tell people when things are bad are coming. I tell them when they ask sometimes, and I give them the answer. When are they going to die? I got that answer. I'm going to die when I'm 83 years old. I'm 59 years old now, but my birthday's in November. But I'm going to die in August on the third week on a Wednesday night, August the 18th in 2049. I'm going to sleep, and that's it. But I found that out because I needed to know how much time I have here to try to get this done. So I don't just do readings. I have a podcast show on a streaming spiritual network called Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson. I have another show in there called Veil Tales. The first one's about everything metaphysical and supernatural. I do interviews like we're doing here within that space, and then the other one's just my personal experiences with spirit. Um, that show is on New Reality TV. It's a streaming. That's a website, but they just went on Roku and Fire TV, so now you can see my face on television. If you download the New Reality TV app, I wrote a book about my life. A New Beginning, My Awakening as a Spirit Medium. So that's my story to becoming a medium and everything that happened to me and for me throughout my life. And I'm busy with that. So this is what I do. I go out and try to teach people to understand why we are here and what is our purpose here. I teach them to learn to listen, trust, and follow through with what their spirit guides are telling them and their soul is telling them. And I teach them about spirit to know where to go and what to do. And don't go into that low energy realm, because if you are there, it's pretty likelihood you're not going to be able to cross over, because you're surrounded by a gazillion other horrible beings. Not everyone there is bad, but I find things out there. You still feel physical pain while still being there, because you let when you're there, you still have your what you have here: pain, anger, sorrow, grief, guilt, anguish, hate, greed, selfishness, trauma, anxiety, depression. And you still have it there because you do not cross over into the light. You remain low energy realm. You still have it there. You don't have a physical body, but you still feel physical pain, because I've seen spirit do horrible things to other things, and they feel because you see them feeling it. And I've had others. I had a little boy walk up to me with a woman one time, and he said, "Mister, I'm going to punch you in the face." And I looked at him. I said, "Oh, go ahead and try it, kid, but give it your best shot." And he tried. He went like this and couldn't get his fist to go. I said, "How's that going for you?" He said, "Why can't I do it?" I said, "Because I'm being protected. You see who's around me." He says, "Oh, I know who they are." Archangels. And I said, "Well, they're not going to let you do that to me. So walk away, because if you don't, I'm going to have them mojo your butt out of here. And you don't want that." And they had a woman with them, and she grabbed him by the hand and said, "Let's go. We don't want that kind of trouble." Because they will put positive energy on them, and that makes them feel pain. So, yeah. But, yeah, I see spirit every single day of my life. It never turns off. It never goes away. So imagine that, trying to go to sleep at night when you have 1,000 people standing around you, talking to you or around you. It's like being in a crowded mall. You can't always pick out one, but there's a couple that come and visit me frequently. But everyone else, I see gazillions. That's how I'm going to say. I see sometimes in the lower energy realm, I see what looks like an ocean of people or ocean of beings, because I won't always call them people. And then I also see into heaven too, and I see an ocean of people and other beings as well. So yeah, I see it all day long. It never turns off. It never goes away. But I'm here to educate people, to try to get them on track with their lives, to give them direction in their lives, so they can go to be in the right places that they're meant to be in order to be able to fulfill their purpose, to get it done, to be able to go home. Because I've done readings for people. The average time people here are between 26 and 29 lifetimes, and that's a lot. I did a reading for a lady who'd been here 43 times. At the end of the reading, I told her, "You have to come back again." She said, "I don't want to come back again." And I said, "Well, I said you're going to have to come back again. That's just the way you have not fulfilled your purpose." Now, and that was my nice way of telling her. I said, "I'm sorry, but you haven't fulfilled your purpose." Now, if I told you that you didn't fulfill your purpose, what would that mean to you? Because then I'll tell you what it meant for her. But you tell me what it would mean for you if I told you you did not fulfill your purpose and you have to come back. What would that
Yeah,
mean?
they probably hit you like a ton of bricks. You'd probably be like, "Wait, I haven't fulfilled my purpose."
Oh, yeah, well, that was my nice way of telling her she was going to die soon. She did 6 months later.
Wow.
Because when I get answers, I'm not good. And
Yeah, you're getting it
I'm
from the direct source.
yes, people know me as being very blunt. I'm very straightforward. I'm very black and white. Someone said I have a no BS delivery because I do, but I tell them the truth. I tell them the truth, not the pretty kind that all the other fake mediums and practitioners do. The ones who tell you that you have a guardian angel and all those people. I don't mess around. I tell them the truth because they need to hear it because we've been had our hands held and coddled for too long with all this fake information. And I'm here to get them the right information, but they got to learn. They have to want to listen. And if they don't want to listen, that's somebody I can't help. I'll move on to somebody else. I'm okay.
All right,
And that's what I do now, Chris.
it's a great way to wrap up the show. But just saying, really, I just want to say thank you for coming on and telling your story and sharing all that information. You shared a lot.
Everybody's got a different story. You never know what's going to come out of somebody's mouth. You just never know because you never really know what's going on with anybody in this world. Everyone in this world is going through something. There's nobody who's not going through something in this world. Just a lot of people are good actors, or they just don't say it. They just walk around and you just think they're just like you. And then we look at them and we go, I don't like their shoes and stuff like that. I don't like what they're wearing. Look at their hair and all that stuff. And I always tell people to take a self inventory of yourself and think of everything that you've been through and know that you've been through some crap in your life, and then look at them and instead, and you could do one of two things. You could just bite your lip and walk away because you don't have the right to judge them, or just walk up to them and greet them and say, hello, how are you? Good, how are you? I'm doing great. How about yourself? A little bit of a day today. Yeah, I've had one of those days, but hopefully your day will get better. And if you do that, do it just a little act of kindness like that. Maybe you'll change the perspective on their day or something throughout their life, and maybe they'll try to do something better for themselves. But because if we don't do, we all live on the same planet. No one's going anywhere anytime soon, so we better start to get along with each other before we annihilate each other. And that's what we're headed towards. We point rockets at each other. We build walls around each other. We need to wake up and say we're all in this together because we've always all been in this together.
Yeah,
We gotta get it figured out because if we don't, we're heading to a really bad direction. And I'm here to try to get everybody to understand that we're here to do this together, to take care of each other and look out for each other, because that's what God wants for us. But we just don't do a very good job.
All right, I know you were touching on it before. You were saying, where you can find your stuff at, but where can people, after hearing your story and listening to it, where can they contact you directly?
They can find me. I have a website called Spirit Medium Daniel. It's spiritmediumdaniel.com. That's where they can book a reading with me. That's where they can purchase my book. My book's on Amazon. My book's in 3 different versions. We now have an audio book. I didn't do it because I sounded like crap, but we got a professional guy doing it because I don't read books. I wrote it, but I don't read books. My wife reads. When she reads, I go reading. But yeah, we have a paperback, an audio book, and an ebook. You can find it there. You can find me. I'm on Facebook. I have a group on there called the Spirit Medium Daniel Group, of which I post a lot of positive messages there and talk to people and they ask me questions. You can, if you like, anywhere you like to listen to or watch podcasting, put my name in. Put in, my name is Daniel Jackson, but put in Spirit Medium Daniel Jackson. You will see that I have done a crap load of interviews, over 350 at this point. 3 this week, 4 this month, 2 next month I have to do. But I'm always putting the word. I'm always trying to talk to people and have real conversations like you and I are having about our lives and what our lives are like. They can find me on Instagram at spirit.medium.daniel. They can find me I do a live show on TikTok 5 nights a week, Spirit Medium Daniel on there. And then the big thing is I have a podcast called Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson. That's all about metaphysical and supernatural. That's a brand new show every week. And that's on a place called New Reality TV. So if you go to newrealitytv.com, you can watch my show there. I think there's 61 episodes. They went live like a year and a few months ago. And then as of recently, they went on Roku and Fire TV. Soon also going on Apple TV, Google TV, the Android app, a couple of the apps on television, but they're on Roku and Fire TV right now. You just have to go on there and download the New Reality TV app. Um, and then once you do that, you can watch my show. But also there's 50 other creators on there. There's 50 creators. There is movies, there's documentaries, there's even a cooking show, there's meditations on there. And it's all a spiritually based network. It's all about helping people. Um, yeah. Geez. I don't know. I'm usually down the alley, sitting on the corner or something like that. I don't know. I'm just, all you have to do, I mean, you can, I don't know who else, I don't know anybody, I don't do this for my other people, but someone I was doing a podcast on like a year ago, I said, he said this big thing about me. I was like, man, where'd you get all that information about me? He said, oh, I Googled you. Have you ever done that? I was like, no, I've never
No.
Googled myself. Why would I do that? That's kind of odd. He said, you need to Google yourself. He said, ask yourself, go on AI. He said, that's when I Googled you, and then I went on to AI. And then he said, I asked with the vocal thing, what can you tell me about spirit medium Daniel? But he put my last name in, Jackson. He said, what can you tell me about spirit medium Daniel Jackson? You'd be surprised what it tells you, Mr. Jackson. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. So I tried it afterwards, and I was like, my God. I mean, it tells you
Got my
about
hook.
it tells you about my book, tells you about my show, tells you about everything about my life and what I went through and all this stuff. But here's what I can tell you about Spirit Medium Daniel Jackson. He's a podcast host of Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson on New Reality TV. There's a book called The New Beginning. My Wagon as a Spirit Medium. He sees angels and talks to angels in spirit. And I was like, my gosh, this is amazing. So, yeah, I even tell that to people. If you need to find out information about me, go on AI and ask about Spirit Medium Daniel Jackson. What do you need to know about me? It'll tell you everything. Yeah, so all you have to do is put in Spirit Medium Daniel or Spirit Medium Daniel Jackson. There's another guy out there named Medium Daniel. It's not me. You can see because he don't look like me. He's got a little I don't know, makeup on, whatever. But I stopped doing that in the '80s. But but you put in Spirit Medium Daniel Jackson, my last name, and you'll find out everything you need to know about me, of what I'm trying to do, the message I'm trying to bring across to people. But again, I'm not rainbows and unicorns and everything is love and light kind of medium. I tell the truth, not the pretty kind, because the pretty kind is everything that doesn't serve us a purpose here. So, but if you want truth and you want to learn something, you come find me because I'll teach it to you.
And that's how we'll finish it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for listening. This is your podcast host, Chris. And that's Daniel Jackson. Until next time, peace out.